So for me, it's a pleasure to introduce the last speaker of this afternoon and the whole event, Barbara Shapira. And she is from Université Rennes, sorry for my French, resonance on non-compact negative curve manifolds.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very happy to speak at the occasion of Lorenzo's birthday. I must say that I'm not always happy when I receive an email from Lorenzo, because it often means that I will have an additional report to do. But still, I'm very happy to speak here tonight, or today. I'm sorry, here it's night. Okay, so I would like to speak about a work that I did with Sébastien Goisel and Samuel Tapie about resonances for geodesic flows in negative curvature. Okay, let me begin with some motivation. So the geodesic flow in negative curvature is known to be a very chaotic flow. It's a hyperbolic flow. In the compact case, on my picture, the manifold is compact, and then it will be maybe the typical example of another flow. But even if you imagine a manifold which could be very non-compact, then the geodesic flow will have infinitesimally the same behavior, and you expect that it will be very chaotic in any sense you want to give to this word. Okay, and there are several meanings that you can give to this word chaotic, and one is that the geodesic flow has many Gibbs measures. What is a Gibbs measure? Imagine you choose a map on your manifold called the potential, which maybe is very high at some places and very low at some other places of your manifold. And then there will exist what is called a Gibbs measure, which essentially is a measure which gives large measure to the trajectories which spend a lot of time at the places where the potential is large, and which spend very small amount of time at the places where the potential is small. That's a Gibbs measure. That's not a definition, but that's an intuitive way to think about it. And if for any potential that you imagine you can find such a measure, then it means that you will have many, many invariant measures, and therefore many, many different behaviors. And so that's a sign of chaos. Okay, and another way to see the chaotic behavior of the geodesic flow is its product structure. So here we are in geometry, so our flow is can be seen. Okay, I will not. I don't want to give too many notation, but you are in negative curvature, so you have a negatively curved manifold, and this manifold is a quotient of its universal cover, which is diffeomorphic to a ball by a group. And on this universal cover, all the trajectories of your flow can be parameterized by a real parameter and two endpoints in some boundary. And so these two endpoints have okay, they are sorry for my English. Okay, these two endpoints allow you to give a product coordinates. It means that the space that interests you, the unit tangent bundle on which the geodesic flow acts, you can see it as a product space. So any vector here on your space, here I have a small vector, is parameterized by a negative endpoint, which describes the past of the trajectory, a positive endpoint, which describes the future of your trajectory, and a real parameter describing the parameterization of your trajectory. And this geometric characteristic of the geodesic flow means many things, and in particular, this product structure means that somehow if you have measures that respect this product structure, if you have measures which are product measures, then somehow past here and future here will be independent. Okay, independence is a notion in probability, but in dynamical system, in ergodic theory, we will speak not of probability, not of independence, sorry, but of mixing. And the point is that the nice measure that I mentioned 1 minute ago, the Gibbs measures, they are the nicest measures that you can dream when you study a chaotic dynamical system. They are product measures in these coordinates, and as a consequence, by a lot of results that start maybe with Hopf in the 30s, and I cited Martin Babillot, who proved that they are mixing. Okay, so these measures are product measures, and therefore they are ergodic. That's the Hopf argument, and they are mixing, and that's the latest result of Martin Babillot. What is mixing? It's a dynamical version of independence. It means that each time you take two continuous maps, phi and psi, you consider the integral of phi times psi composed with gt. Gt is the geodesic flow. You integrate this quantity with respect to your measure, and then by a kind of asymptotic independence, it converges to the integral of psi times the integral of, oh, so there is a phi and a psi. Okay, you understood that. And okay, so you have this convergence, which is a kind of asymptotic independence between phi and psi. And of course, as usual, as you are a mathematician, you see a convergence, and then it's a kind of automatic question: what is the speed of convergence? And of course, if this convergence is very slow, it's just an abstract result. However, if you are able to prove that the convergence is fast, for example, exponential, then it will be an effective result, which will allow you to get more precise result as, I don't know, central limit theorems and things like that. So, and as the geodesic flow is a typical example of a chaotic flow, you expect that you hope an exponential convergence. Okay, and that's a natural goal. And okay, I don't have a very long amount of time, so I don't want to be very long on history. But still, I would like to spend a few minutes to explain to you that results on speed of mixing are quite recent. Recent, depending what you are interested in. For hyperbolic diffeomorphisms of a compact manifold, it's known since maybe Ruel and Bowen that, okay, if you take a Gibbs measure, you will have exponential mixing. If you consider a flow mixing, speed of mixing for a flow is much more difficult. There are results in particular cases when the curvature is constant and the manifold has finite volume thanks to tools of a representation theory of liquids. But in general, when the curvature is variable, there were no result in the 20th century, essentially. And the story began, okay, with Chernoff and really with Dolgopiat, who got exponential mixing of Gibbs measures, but just in dimension 2 for compact surfaces. And okay, Liverani, a few years after, Liverani improved this result in any dimension, but just for the Lebesgue measure. So one strong restriction again. The Lebesgue measure is a Gibbs measure, but a very particular one. And okay, Stoyanov improved that for every Gibbs measure, but still with an assumption on the curvature. And then, okay, there were a few recent results. And in the non-compact case, there are very, very few results. There's a relatively recent result of Avila and Guezel about Teichmüller flow. But for the case of geodesic flow, their result reproves the case of finite volume hyperbolic manifolds. So it does not give more than what was known. There is an analytic result by Bontonneau and Weich which deals with variable negative curvature, but it's the curvature is allowed to be variable only in a compact set, so it's not. It's a little bit frustrating, even if it is a very difficult one. And okay, there I will maybe skip the end. It's just to say that there are very few results proving exponential mixing of the geodesic flow in full generality for all Gibbs measures. And I'm particularly interested in a non-compact manifolds. And in non-compact manifolds, okay, all the results I mentioned for geodesic flows work for compact negatively curved manifolds. And very, very few things are known in very particular case for non-compact manifolds. So, okay, what we are interested in is to get, okay, an exponential convergence for this difference of correlation, which is called correlation. So we know that this quantity goes to 0, and we want to prove that it converges exponentially to 0. For the moment, we are not able to prove that, but we can notice one thing, that if this quantity, which is called the correlation function of prime psi, if this is exponentially converging to 0, then if you consider the integral of this quantity, it will be with a complex parameter z, then it will be defined and holomorphic for complex number whose real part is greater than -8. What I mean is that if this thing, if you know that this is decreasing as exponential -80, I don't know, then this will be holomorphic for all z, such that the real part of z is greater than -8. That's if you are knowing the results that you dream of, okay? But okay, you don't know that, so you don't know that this quantity is holomorphic. However, it goes in the reverse direction. It's a classical important step to go towards the mixing of the flow, to be able to prove that this thing is meromorphic in the negative part of the negative half plane. And that's what we prove under some assumption that I will discuss later. We are able to prove that this map, which is a priori defined and holomorphic on the right of the complex plane, in fact, we are able to prove that it is meromorphic in a certain strip here with a discrete set of poles, which are called the resonances. And the width of the strip is a quantity which has a dynamical meaning that I will discuss in the sequel of the talk. So that's our main result. And okay, it's interesting by itself. It has a corollary, which is the analyticity of the pressure that I will define in a moment. And it gives the hope, it's not a proof, it's a hope, that we could get exponential mixing by the same kind of arguments as that work in some cases in the compact case. For example, we hope that Liverani's argument could work to get the exponential mixing of the Lebesgue measure in the case where it's finite, so on finite volume manifolds, and maybe also in another case where it's known that you have mixing in the compact case in dimension 2 for Gibbs measures, but that's maybe more problematic.
Barbara?
Yes.
So this hope of getting exponential mixing from your result, it is you get mixing for infinite functions also, or you gain some regularity by other arguments. You can get mixing with this result. Could you get mixing for like a C1 function or even less regular function?
I'm not sure to understand your question, and I lost my pen. Sorry, excuse me. Try to. Okay, I'm here. The hope. Okay, let me stay in the maybe most reasonable case. Finite volume Lebesgue measure. The hope is exactly the same as what is known in the compact case. I mean, in the compact case, you have the result of Liverani for the Lebesgue measure in any dimension, but in the compact case. And all these results go with 2 steps. First step, studying being able to get resonances, and then you have the, okay. You have this discrete set of resonances, and then you want to show that after a certain height you don't have any resonances. So it would be okay. The hope is that the proof of Liverani works exactly the same. So I'm not sure that I really understood your question, but you consider smooth maps and smooth potential, and same assumption. Is it?
The question was the correlation function that you consider, which is in the correlation function that you consider for considering the mixing, which is the regularity of the test function that you apply. Correlation function.
Okay. It works for smooth function and it's not optimal, and okay, it's in the paper. I don't remember exactly. You can do better than smooth, but you need a regularity which is larger than this gap. And I don't remember if you need maybe twice the gap, or I don't remember exactly. Let's say twice the gap, but I must say I forgot the precise regularity. Okay, maybe smooth is not necessary if it is the question.
Okay, but then when you use these results to get mixing, the test functions that you apply, they need to have the same regularity as in this statement, or you can get the mixing for less regular functions.
For the moment, I don't know. Okay, we didn't finish to write completely. I put 2022 because we don't find time to finish to write this paper, and we would like to finish to write this paper properly before beginning to write mixing. But so for the moment, we are at the resonances, and okay, it will work. It will probably work for smooth functions, and I don't want to state something today for regularity for a result which is not proven yet. Okay, and so in this, okay, the talk is too short to explain the complete proof of such a result, but I would like to spend the rest of the time to explain what is this assumption, strongly positively recurrent potential, and what is a pressure at infinity. And so I need to speak about pressure, and so that's what I will do now. But before speaking about pressure, I would like to speak about entropy, because pressure is just a complicated or weighted version of entropy. But if you don't know entropy, it's better to introduce it. So as I said before, we are in a context where we look at a negatively curved manifold, M, and this manifold is a quotient of, there's a mistake here, of its universal cover and tilde by a certain group. So M is the quotient of its universal cover by a discrete group, and the discrete group gamma is the fundamental group of the manifold. And there are many dynamical properties of the geodesic flow on the quotient, which are directly related to the property of the discrete group gamma acting on the universal cover. And so in particular, it's very nice that the entropy of the geodesic flow, in fact, you can compute it in many ways. First, you can look at the orbit of the group, and it's a discrete set, and you can count how many points of your set you have involved, and it grows exponentially fast. And then you look at the exponential growth rate of an orbit, and it's called the critical exponent. You can also look at what is called the Gurevich entropy of the geodesic flow. What it is, you consider all the periodic orbits of your dynamical system, and as a mini hyperbolic dynamical system, the entropy is related to the growth rate of the number of periodic orbits. That's what I wrote here. There is just a trap here, that is that when you are interested in non-compact manifolds, you can have infinitely many periodic orbits that have same length. And so typically this set, if you look at all periodic orbits of length, oh, I didn't introduce this notation, but if you consider all periodic orbits of length less than t, for example, typically it will be infinite. So you have to take a normalization and to consider a compact set, an arbitrarily large compact set, and to restrict yourself to count how many periodic orbits you have that intersect this compact set. That's a kind of normalization. Here it's this compact set. So here it's a pk of t is the set of periodic orbits of length at most t that intersect this given compact set. And you look at the growth rate, the exponential growth rate of this number, and there is a third way to see entropy, which is the following. You consider what is called a dynamical ball or a bow and ball. So what it is, you consider a vector, you consider the orbit of your vector until time t, and you will look at the orbits that follow this orbit until time t at the precision epsilon. Okay, and it will give you a set which is called a dynamical ball, which is smaller and smaller when t becomes larger and larger. So when it decreases typically exponentially fast, and when you have an invariant measure for your dynamical system, you can look at its measure theoretic entropy. And it is essentially, I cheat a little bit, but I don't want to enter into details, but you will, in the compact case, I don't cheat, but okay, you will look at the typical exponential decay of the measure of these balls. That's what is written here. And then the variational entropy will be typically this, the supremum of all these possible entropies when the measure mu is varying among all invariant probability measures. Okay, and all these definition of entropies, what is nice is that all these definition of entropies coincide. That's a theorem due to many people. It also coincides also with a certain Hausdorff dimension of the recurrent trajectories, but I don't want to present this aspect of things. And pressure is just a weighted version of entropy. So if you consider a map on your manifold that you really see as a weight saying which part of the manifold you want to see more than the others, then you have a version of the critical exponent, which is just a weight version. Instead of counting points of the orbit, you weight them by this weight. You can count periodic orbits of length t, but you weight them, instead of counting, you weight them by this weight, which will give more importance to the periodic orbits where the potential is large. And similarly, the variational pressure is just a weighted version of entropy. You consider the entropy plus the integral of the potential. And of course, all pressures coincide. That's good news. Okay, and sorry. Now, in my result, what the assumption was, we consider a smooth, strongly positively recurrent potential. That is that we ask that some pressure at infinity is strictly smaller than the pressure. So the pressure here is exactly what I defined a second ago. And now I need to explain to you what is this pressure at infinity, or entropy at infinity in the case of the zero potential. The point is that, okay, we are interested in non-compact manifolds. And in non-compact manifolds, you want to understand, okay, you have a certain, you have the dynamics of your dynamical system, okay? And this, entropy and pressure measure the complexity of the dynamics. And you want to understand which amount of the complexity is due to the non-compactness. So you choose a large compact set, and you would like to know which amount of complexity comes from trajectory which are far from, which go far away from your compact set. And that will be the meaning of entropy or pressure at infinity. And so you want to understand the growth rate of the trajectories which go outside the compact set, which are essentially excursions outside your compact set. So first you have to define what could be an excursion outside your compact set. So a way to define it is to introduce this subset. So as I said, the manifold M is the quotient of its universal cover by a certain discrete group gamma. And each time you have an element gamma of your group and an element of your orbit, you consider the geodesic segment from O to gamma O here. Another color. And if I look at this geodesic segment here on the quotient, I will get a loop which is like that. And now I would like to say that some loops represent excursions outside my compact set and some other do not represent excursions. So in fact, I consider a compact set here in the universal cover, and I consider its images by the orbit of the group. And I will call an element gamma will be an excursion if when I look at the geodesic segment from O to gamma O, of course, it intersects the compact set at the beginning, it intersects the compact set at the end, but I ask that it does not intersect any other copy. So it intersects the orbit of the compact set just at the beginning and at the end. That's what is the meaning of an excursion. Typically, this segment is an excursion, but this one here is not an excursion because it goes outside my compact set, comes back, goes outside, comes back. So it's maybe a loop like that. I don't know. And it's not an excursion. And now, okay, I will define pressure, entropy or pressure at infinity by measuring the critical exponent of this subset. So I look at here it's a weighted critical exponent of all elements corresponding to excursions outside my compact set. And I will define a critical pressure at infinity by considering the infimum of all these quantities. X is not X, it's M. So I consider the infimum of this growth of excursions. And that's a pressure at infinity. And for all other definition of entropy or pressure, I have a version of entropy at infinity or pressure. For example, concerning the growth rate of periodic orbits, I can come back to my definition. I consider all the periodic orbits which intersect a given compact set, but the time that they spend inside my compact set is small. It's so it's a periodic orbit of my geodesic flow. So at some point it will come back, but the amount of the proportion of time spent in K is at most alpha. And then I take an infimum over larger and larger compact set and a limit when alpha goes to 0 of this growth rate of periodic orbit. And there is also a variational version of pressure at infinity, which is the following. I still consider a large compact set. Okay, and I will be interested in measures mu such that the measure of my compact set is small. And then I consider the infimum when the compact set becomes larger and larger, and the limit when epsilon goes to 0 of the variational pressure with this condition. So I consider the pressure that I can get outside any compact set. All definitions represent somehow this idea of measuring the growth or weighted growth of the dynamics outside of larger and larger compact sets. What is not completely trivial, but what is true, and okay, I can write 21 because it's written available. So all these quantities coincide. That's a good news. And I think maybe Felipe is here, that it also coincide with the kind of Hausdorff dimension of direction, which come back to a compact set, but not too much. Okay. And now what is strong positive recurrence So I will say that a manifold is strongly positively recurrent when the entropy at infinity is strictly smaller than the entropy. And okay, the terminology comes from random walks and then symbolic dynamics. And in fact, at the same period came, there were other works in geometric group theory where they speak about statistically convex co-compact manifolds. And it's very funny, it's often the case in math that people in different groups of mathematics discover the same notion and give a different name. And so it's really exactly the same thing. But we are also considering potentials and thermodynamical formalism, and we will call a potential strongly positively recurrent if the pressure at infinity is strictly smaller than the pressure. You have a pressure gap. And okay, I will take a few seconds to give you the typical examples, because it's this notion is interesting only if you have interesting examples. So for SPR manifolds, it means that the zero potential is strongly positively recurrent. So of course, compact manifolds will be strongly positively recurrent. It's not very interesting, but it's true. Geometrically finite hyperbolic manifolds, I don't want to define it for those who don't know, but it's just a kind of manifolds where, okay, they are non-compact, but they have finitely many ends, which are very easy to understand geometrically. And there are other interesting new families of examples. Maybe the family which I like very much is the family of what we call Ancona surfaces. Why Ancona? Because there is an unpublished paper of Ancona where he produces a kind of example like that. The idea is the following: you start with a manifold which has an entropy. You start with a hyperbolic surface whose entropy is strictly smaller than 1. It exists. And then you perturb it to produce some part of your surface which looks like a finite volume hyperbolic surface. And so you didn't change the entropy at infinity, which is strictly smaller than 1, but you make the topological entropy go closer and closer to 1. And so we can produce many examples in this way, which are really far from geometrically finite, far from what was known before, and strongly positively recurrent. And concerning potentials, I think that I should stop very soon, so I will go quite fast. You can take any potential F, and you can perturb it by a compact perturbation. So you have your potential, which does what you want, and on a compact set, you will add a bump, a very high bump, and at some point, you will produce a strict inequality because between the pressure and the pressure at infinity. There is also a way to add small bumps, but on larger and larger support. So you add bumps, but which are larger and larger, and then you will also at some point produce strict inequalities. And that are typical examples which show that on any manifold you can build a strongly positively recurrent potential. And what is interesting, oh, I forgot, I missed, okay, I forgot a slide, I'm sorry. And I guess I have to stop very soon, but what I should mention is that when you have this property of a strong positive recurrence, it has many implications. So I stated the result about resonances, but there is a result that we proved before, and which is in the preceding paper with same authors. So I can write 2021, that when you have a potential which has this property, then you are sure that the Gibbs, there exists a finite Gibbs measure. And in fact, this is very classical in the compact case, but in the non-compact case, what happens is that you have a natural geometric construction of these measures, but they can be infinite. And if they are infinite, you cannot do anything with them. You cannot guarantee that they are interesting or even ergodic or whatever. But as soon as they are finite, you will be sure that they will be conservative, ergodic, and mixing. And we are able to prove that when you have this strong positive recurrence, this measure is finite, and therefore ergodic, mixing. And I guess I should stop 2 minutes ago. I'm not sure about the schedule, in fact.
It's okay, you are the last one, so you can continue.
I can continue. Okay, well, I can continue. But can you tell me how long I can continue? Just to.
How much do you need? 5 minutes or more?
No, I don't know. It can be a good place to stop, or I can give more details on the proof, but I have no idea how long it. I'm not sure it's reasonable to enter the proof.
I think more 5 minutes, so you can continue.
Okay, I can continue. Okay. So I explained to you what is a strong positive recurrence, and I gave to you some examples of manifolds and potential which satisfy that. And now I will come back to the statement that I want to prove, which is, where is it? It's here. Maybe there are too many things on my slide. Okay, on this, I have this assumption that the pressure at infinity is strictly smaller than the pressure. And then I take a smooth maps. Okay, smooth is not optimal. I don't remember. It's maybe there are CP maybe with P, which is twice the pressure gap, but I'm not sure. So I prefer not to write it. I don't remember the precise regularity. And I look at this Laplace correlation function, and what I claim is that this quantity is meromorphic on this strip. And in fact, the proof of such a result is relatively classical now for people who know all this theory, and maybe in the audience, some of you know that much better than me. But so part of the proof are classical, and I would like to explain just what we add to the proof, not the classical proof. So I come back to, okay, so here is the flavor of the proof. So I recall I am considering this correlation function. I assume that the maps have integral 0, so I don't have the difference of integrals to consider. And okay, I have my map psi composed with the geodesic flow, and by a kind of duality, I introduce the operator LT, which is the dual operator in this formula. And I will write the Laplace correlation function, the Laplace transform of the correlation. As this is an integral, I write it as a double integral, and with this operator LT. And so it's very natural to introduce what is called the resolvent, which is this operator, which is the integral from 0 to infinity of exponential minus zt times lt dt. You can see it as a complete formal calculus. And and you can also observe formally that it is the formal inverse of z times the identity minus the infinitesimal generator of this symmetry. And okay, there are classical steps in the proof. One classical step, which is almost not formal, but almost maybe, tells you that if you know if you understand well the essential spectrum of this resolvent for all z in the right half plane, if you are able to, for such a z which is in the right part of the half plane, if you are able to understand the spectrum of this operator, but understanding, okay, knowledge is quite vague, but in fact it's a precise knowledge. If you are able to control the essential spectral radius of these operators here, then you will be able to prove that this operator is meromorphic somewhere a little bit more on the left. And if you control the essential radius of this operator, you will be able to have this meromorphy that you said. And the fact is that this resolvent is an integral. Okay, it's maybe a kind of formal computation, but it's an integral of exponential minus dt times this LT dt, where LT is a kind of dual of the geodesic flow. And if you understand well the spectral properties of LT on good Banach spaces, which are called now anisotropic Banach spaces, which have been studied extensively by people like Liderani, Baladi, Guizel, and other people, then you will be able to get the information that you want about the essential spectrum of the resolvent, and then to get the result. And okay, what does it mean, good Banach spaces? These good Banach spaces are Banach spaces which contain the smooth map with compact support and which are included in their dual, and which are the norms involve integers p and q, which are related to the regularity of the test function that you are considering. And in fact, these Banach spaces are the closure of the set of smooth function with compact support with respect to some norms which are related to the product structure of the geodesic flow, and I'm not sure to be able to produce a. So on the stable direction, the norm will have a certain form. On the unstable direction, it will have another form. But I really don't want to enter into the definition of the norm now. And okay, there is a classical result in this question of mixing, telling you that if you are able to get inequalities called the Lazotta-York inequalities of this type, involving the norm with an exponential decay of something, with a parameter sigma, which is related to the pressure gap, and something which is a compact operator that you don't care about, then you are happy and you have what you want. And so somehow, if you accept that there exists a huge machinery involving these anisotropic Banach spaces, at some point you want to prove that a certain quantity decays exponentially fast relatively to a parameter which is essentially the pressure gap. And so that's what you want to get. And okay, I don't want to give any details on the computation. The point is that these quantities that you have to estimate involve some other quantities which have, if I cheat a lot, but they have this kind of type. You take a piece of unstable manifold, W, and you will integrate functions on it, but you will integrate them, then I don't know, maybe you have a test function, and you have this operator applied to another function. You integrate it with respect to a measure, which is a conditional measure of your Gibbs measure on the unstable manifold. And usually the natural way to introduce the norm would be to normalize by the measure of the conditional manifold. But now you normalize it by something else. And this something else, what it is the conditional measure of a Gibbs measure for another potential. And what is the other potential? It's a trick which is which comes, there is a mixed inspiration from a paper of Avila Guizel and another from Sierre Sarig, where you understand that you want to have a weight which allows you to gain a kind of exponential decay when you are far at infinity. So the point is that you have a potential, you have a non-compact manifold, and you have on this non-compact manifold, you have a potential F, and you don't know how it is, your potential F, and it has a certain pressure at infinity, which is strictly smaller than the pressure. And what is easy to check is that you can modify your potential on maybe a large compact set here, and outside you don't modify it. So outside the compact set, G is the same as F, but inside the compact set you subtract the pressure gap. So inside the compact set, G is F minus the pressure gap. And it will allow, if the compact set is larger and larger and larger and larger, then what happens is that the pressure of G is essentially the pressure at infinity of F, and the pressure at infinity of G is really the pressure at infinity of F, because you did only a compact perturbation. And why is it interesting? The point is that in a compact set, you can use classical arguments about resonances and anisotropic Banach spaces, which are subtle and difficult arguments, but they don't change. They are already written. And the interesting thing is what happens outside a compact set. When you are looking at these quantities, it means that you will apply the geodesic law and push the measures. And the point is that when the piece of unstable manifold that you look at is far at infinity, when you push the conditional measure of the potential F, of the Gibbs measure associated to the potential F, you get an exponential constant quantity, which is this one. And when you push the conditional measure associated to the potential G, you have another constant. And when you consider this ratio between this numerator and denominator, and you look at what happens, then you get, okay, I'm not sure I wrote the signs in the good direction. I have really a problem of signs in the life. But at the end, the point is that you get an exponential decay just by this trick. And of course, I hide many details, which are not details. It's a kind of hard piece of math, but it's really not a novelty of this work. And so I will stop here.
Thanks, Barbara. Is there any question, comments?
I have a question. So when a consequence of your result is that when you have a strongly positive recurrent potential, then the pressure is analytic, right?
Locally, yes.
Locally. So that's my question. What do you mean by the corollary that you wrote?
Oh. Okay, there is the point is that I'm at the good page. When you do this trick, in fact, what is hidden here is that the space is, okay, you have a potential F, which is strongly positively recurrent, and you can find another potential G, and this potential G, in fact, okay, that's not written correctly here, but this potential will be adapted for many variation of the potential F. I'm not sure to do the sentence. So what I mean is that if I have an F epsilon, which is close to F, which is a perturbation of F, which is in a very small neighborhood of F, I can consider the same G for F and F epsilon. And so I have the Banach spaces BPQ that are considered. They are closure of sets of smooth function with compact support with respect to a certain norm. And this norm involves, in fact, it's not well written here, something is hidden that I don't want to right? But they depend really on G, but not on F. And so you get spectral properties of your resolvent and of many things on Banach spaces that don't depend on the potential, and so it allows to consider analytical perturbations of your potential. So it will be true inside the set of strongly positively recurrent. In fact, you don't care because if it's analytic locally, it's analytic. Okay, it will be smooth inside the set of strongly positively recurrent potentials.
Thank you.
Is there any other question?
Yes, may I ask something? Okay.
Sure.
So, Barbara, thank you for the talk. The question is very less technical. I don't know if you accept some philosophical question about these measures. So, in this last transparency, you have this Margulis type of measures, Margulis properties. You have this Radon derivative, which is exponential of something. Yeah. I suppose that I'm not sure. Please correct me. I suppose that in these cases, also to construct these Gibbs measures, you go to the boundary, this boundary of the hyperbolic manifold, and then you use this kind of Hopf parameterization, etc. Yes. So as we know, Margulis had done the construction of Gibbs measures, although for anisotropic flows, but for measure of maximal entropy, in fact, but he constructed it analytically. So he constructed it measures on the foliations, on the leaves of the foliation. And it is purely analytical. So it really uses this, it found these numbers are eigen, sorry?
I would have said geometrical instead of analytical, but
this is the point. I would like the approach of Margulis works for not necessarily geometric setting, not necessarily geodesic flow, where by my knowledge, I don't know how to define a boundary. So exactly this is the point. When I said it is philosophically question, I don't know if there is some way of doing all of these things geometrically. So it seems that really geometry, it is a quote due to Birkhoff. Geometry is going to be a very a very beautiful trap for analysis. But this is a quote by Birkhoff. So I don't know if it is true or not in this case. So is it true that all of the constructions that had been done geometrically could be done analytically or not? So Margulis' construction is really analytical.
Okay, I'm not completely sure about.
Sorry for the long
analytic, but there is something hidden that I don't want to write. It becomes late in France, but there is a result. What we obtain is a spectral result on the resolvent saying getting a bound, an exponentially small bound on the essential spectrum, but giving also an information on the dominant eigenvalue and eigenfunction. And this corresponds to this Margulis measure. But why I don't understand the word analytical is that for me, the Margulis construction, you take a piece of unstable manifold, you integrate a function on it, you push by the geodesic flow, you take weak limits, and you get something which should be the stable and unstable conditional measures, and then recover locally a measure, which is the Gibbs. You recover locally the conditional measures.
Yes.
And with this, I don't remember exactly, but I think we discussed about this fact with Sebastian that because there is this paper about resonances, but we wrote a paper before saying that all pressures coincide and there exists a finite Gibbs measure, blah blah blah. And at some point, I had this question that in fact the Margulis construction should work, but here for the geodesic flow, you don't really need a boundary because you need to understand the geometry of whole spheres, and probably the strong positive recurrence assumption would allow to make the Margulis construction work.
That would be
And-
great.
But then you would not get better because okay, okay. I don't think it would be much easier, but in fact, when you think about Gibbs or merger, there is another construction that I like very much, which is the Bowen construction, considering
Periodic.
weighted periodic orbits
Yes,
and
yes.
and a closure of limit.
Yeah, this
You
weak
take
limit,
averages on
weak
periodic
limit,
orbits,
yes.
you weight them, and then you take
Yeah.
weak limits.
Yes.
And my feeling is that this Bowen construction is much more robust. If you want to take other dynamical systems and to play the same game. And so, okay, that's easy to
I
say.
consider this Bowen construction very similar to Patterson-Sullivan, parallel to this Patterson-Sullivan method. When you consider
Patterson-Sullivan
this
is very, very specific to geodesic flow.
Mhm.
And you see, I'm almost sure, okay, I didn't check all details, but I thought about it a few months ago. I'm almost sure that Bowen's construction will work because, okay, you see precisely, sorry, I'm not able to come back to the definition of pressure. There is this definition of pressure by if you have a hyperbolic dynamical system where the pressure is equal to the pressure as the exponential growth rate of periodic orbits, and if you also know that the pressure at infinity is given by a kind of exponential growth rate of periodic orbits that spend most of their life far from any compact set, then the Bowen construction of the Gibbs measure should work as usual and give you an equilibrium measure. And the point is that it is not interesting to think about this in geometry. When you study the geodesic flow, there are many reasons why the Patterson-Sullivan construction using the boundary at infinity is much easier. So Bowen or Margulis constructions, which are more general in the world of dynamical system, it's interesting to study them if you have interesting examples. And interesting examples of hyperbolic dynamical system in the non-compact setting. For the moment, I know the symbolic dynamics, and you have a lot of papers of Sarig and Sir Sarig, and then many other people. So in symbolic dynamics, they don't care about Bowen or whatever. They have operators, and they know how to do without the help of anybody.
Well, you don't have every time symbolic dynamics. But you don't have every time symbolic dynamics. Symbolic dynamics has its restrictions of application.
Of course, no. What I say is that if you think about interesting examples in the non-compact setting, you have on the one hand you have the symbolic setting where you have a lot of tools, real Perron-Frobenius operators and blah blah blah. You have the geodesic flow for which the best tool is really the Patterson-Sullivan construction and the boundary at infinity. And then, okay, if you have a general hyperbolic system in a non-compact setting, I would try Bowen construction first before Margulis once, but we could play the game to see what is the best one. The thing is that for the moment, my opinion is that we need interesting example, and at the moment I'm thinking about constructing new examples. So what could be a nice example of non-compact flow, which is reasonably hyperbolic, chaotic, and which is not a geodesic flow, and which is not easily coded by a symbolic dynamics. That's, in my opinion, that the only. I don't see the interest to develop the Bowen or Margulis theory without a new example.
That's true. True. Thank you.
So
You're welcome.
the main result, is it it can be false if you do not have this assumption about strong recurrence?
The main, you mean about resonances?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, I try to come back to the statement. The point is that, okay, as I said, when you have strong positive recurrence, it implies that the measure is finite. So once again, okay, I'm someone, I'm not able to think about problems when I have no examples. When you don't have this SPR assumption, there few things are understood. There are examples where the measure is infinite. When the measure is infinite, I'm not sure I would like to speak about correlation, but there are examples where the measure is infinite and there is a kind of mixing in very, very specific examples. For example, there is the PhD thesis of someone who's called Pierre Vidotto, who did his PhD with Samuel Tapie and Marc Peigné, and who has a nice result about mixing in the infinite case. So what does it mean mixing? It's not completely clear, but still he has nice results. And then you can ask what happens when the measure is finite, but this assumption is not satisfied. So first, there are very few examples. So these, okay, it is not a strong positive recurrence is not equivalent to finiteness of the measure, but there are very few examples with finite measure and not strong positive recurrence. And in these, among these few examples, there are examples developed by Marc Peigné. And we are hoping with Samuel Tapie, we have now a PhD student, and we hope that he will, we would like that he can prove that on some of these examples, you could hope a polynomial mixing of the measure. But for the moment, it's a question of PhD. It's not a finished PhD yet, so we don't know if it will work.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we can thank again Barbara for nice talk. Thank you, Barbara.